And I think that it's very important to be empathetic to that, because there's an added layer of stress to just waking up in the morning these days without
Mhm.
having to worry about AI taking your job.
Strategy is standard, but leading people, that's where the magic happens. In every organization, there comes a moment, a shift, a stretch, a choice. How do you help your people thrive? Give them the voice, the tools, and the leadership they deserve.
I'm Rhonda.
And I'm Kevin.
Welcome to the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast, where we talk about what it takes to lead, coach, and transform from the inside out.
So, when we left off, we were talking about a framework for a change management model specifically geared to help organizations adopt AI.
Okie dokie. Well, as you mentioned, this isn't entirely new. We've initiated this conversation in one of our last podcasts in 2025. And we do want to pick up because, as you very well know, Rhonda, unless you've been um, hanging out on a remote island in the middle of the Pacific with very few square mileage, no running water, no electricity, um, you probably then may be pretty much in the dark and may not have heard of AI. But even under those circumstances, you may have heard of AI. So, for those that might be viewing this when we make it available, yeah, there is this thing called AI that
AI
everybody
coming to a
is in.
remote AI's coming to a remote island near you, right?
Stay tuned.
coming to coming to a rock near you, right?
I'm telling you, if it's not already there.
Right.
Well, seriously, we, you and I have discussed this quite a bit last year, and we made a plan to really focus in this area because we know that it's out there, and there's a lot of anxiety with regards to AI in the workplace. And so today, what I wanted to do was discuss what those issues are. We've got Copilot and generative AI and, all of the tools, whatever that people are engaged in using or whatever, but there's so much more to it. And organizations are making a mad rush, if you will, to implement it in the workplace, have it, in every aspect of their business so that they can stay competitive, work very efficiently, very effectively, and sort of keep up with the Joneses as far as the other organizations using it. So, making sure that people understand that just like any other new process, procedure, program, project, what have you, um, it requires a change in the workplace. What is the anxiety, if you will, in terms of the adoption of AI in the workplace?
Hmm.
And we know that, first of all, it's a resistance driven by fear, if you will,
Yeah.
fear and uncertainty. And as I mentioned previously, the unknown, if you will. And a lot of that is related to job security.
Right.
Um,
That's a big one. I think
Big
that's a
one.
big, huge, big one. That's probably the biggest one, especially in the backdrop of the economic landscape that we're kind of dealing with right now. But
Absolutely.
but I wanted to just insert one thing before you get going with that. I wanted to back up and just really infuse a statement about the importance of being deliberate with managing a change, especially one of this gravity. Um, because even if this was under normal circumstances and we were not talking about AI, which is a big thing right now, whether it's a software migration or a training project or any kind of project, if the project is launched and there's not deliberate consideration given to incorporating a change management component to it, the success factor is not going to be as high because of all of the intricacies involved with getting people to, first of all, be aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and getting them on board with wanting to adopt the change, and then providing them with the capabilities to adopt whatever the change is. Whether it's you want them to start using all totally brand new software, there's a new business process, maybe a company has been bought out by another company, and that's a big culture shift. Um, if you don't handle that with care and keep the people in mind as you go through all these strategies, you're setting yourself up for a little bit of failure. So I just really wanted to drive home that point before we begin. I know we're speaking specifically today about AI changes to organizational processes that are driven by AI, but I just, on its own merit, a change management approach is so valuable and important to the success of any type of organizational change or shift that's going on. So I just wanted to put that in there because it cannot be overstated, in my opinion. So
No, you're absolutely right, Rhonda. You're so on point because what you just drilled down on really is the foundation of a successful adoption, if you will, of AI, just like any other change um, phenomenon that may occur in an organization. The care, if you will, that you referenced or whatever, is so important. It's the underpinning of all of the things that we're going to talk about with regards to what the challenges are with regards to adopting AI in the workplace. So let's take a closer look at what those are. We've already mentioned a lack of understanding and familiarity. Okay. A lot of folks just don't know how it really works. Okay. They hear AI all over the place or whatever. And again, there's some familiarity with using, getting information through Chat GPT, Copilot, and all of those kinds of tools or whatever. And they know how that works and how it may benefit them. But with regards to the whole scale adoption of AI in the workplace, where organizations are using it to actually perform tasks and responsibilities, that's where employees are unfamiliar with it. And that's what's creating the anxiety, the skepticism, the hesitation, if you will, in using the tool or even wanting to learn how to use it. Okay. Um,
yeah, well, yeah,
you know,
I think the familiarity. Yeah, you're right. Especially if you're talking about an industry that isn't necessarily tech forward to begin with. If you work for a company that's in a technology industry, chances are people are going to be pretty adept at AI. They'll know, or at least they will have the capacity and the curiosity to find out and to be self-directed in their learning about it. But what about companies that are, for example, in the skilled trades? You're talking about a construction company where your workforce is used to doing hands-on work. Well, what's AI got to do with that? I could see how there could be a disconnect there, um, and there would be some resistance, and there would be doubt. You're like, we don't need that. you know, I've been a whatever fill in the blank, skilled trades job for 20, 30 years. I know my job. I don't need AI. Um, so yeah, you're right. There's the skepticism, and how does that apply, and what is it? What's in it for me? That's a really important thing to consider. And I wanted
yeah.
to also,
Mhm.
yeah,
Go ahead.
when you said the word skepticism, though, however, really raised something for me. I want to just really call out the elephant in the room, and this came up in a forum recently. I was reading. Um, on a platform that I'm a member of. And there were change practitioners. We discuss and we talk about these issues. And let's just be honest. we're in a time frame where there's a lot of trust issues with companies. Um, People are wondering, what are you going to do with AI exactly? Are you going to replace me? Why should I make it easy for you to replace my job like that? Why should I adopt AI and expedite the elimination of my job? That I hear that repeatedly, job elimination. And what's tied to that is employees not trusting what the companies are going to do with AI. And that's an ugly truth, but it's a truth
And
nonetheless.
thank you for opening the closet door and pulling that skeleton out, if you will, or that elephant,
Well,
because
it was
it's
practically swung the door open itself and was doing the Macarena right in front of us. I mean, it's.
absolutely, absolutely, and that's where I wanted to go next. I wanted to
Mm,
talk about this fear, if you will, of job displacement. You know, everyone, and where that comes from is this: a lot of what everyone talks about with regards to AI is its extreme automation capability, where it could take routine tasks, if you will, and this kind of coincides with that space that you talked about, the organizations where everything is done more manually. And the folks who have been doing those have been doing them for years or whatever. And it's like, okay, so now you're telling me AI can come in and do all of what I've done for the last 20, 25, 30 years or whatever, which means I'm no longer needed. This obviously triggers anxiety about job loss, if you will. Um, you know, eh, and so without and what's really critical, Rod, is that without clear communication, this fear can of all of the above of what we're talking about or whatever can certainly stall or make it impossible for an organization to successfully implement any kind of AI change. Okay, so you hit it on the nail head, um, and it's folks are hearing just like one-sided stuff about AI without really understanding how it works or whatever. So um, it's incumbent upon any organization that's going to really truly adopt AI in their workplace is to start with clear communication. And the thing that you said earlier on is making sure that employees are first and foremost with regards to taking care of them,
mm,
um, taking care of their understanding and alleviating or at least minimizing, if you will, to some degree, the anxiety that comes with AI.
mhm.
Um, some other challenges, and I'm not going to go into any real detail or whatever, but if I mention something that you want to expound on further, let's do it. But you know, there's also this fear or trust in AI systems. Okay, I don't know about how this works or whatever. You mentioned that, especially in those organizations where technology really isn't, you know, uh,
Mhm.
part of that organization's charge, if you will. So in those places in particular, whatever, it's like, okay, well, how does this AI system work? And
Mhm.
you know, conjures up concerns or fear about it being accurate, fair,
Well,
whether it's
yeah,
transparent.
and
You know,
I would say, even I want to add to that that even in instances where that's not necessarily the exact case, but it's, for example, in data science, in the data sciences, right? And I've been reading articles, and people in academia are finding instances where AI is just incorrect. And so there's concern around the validity of some of the information that is, produced through AI. And that's why it's really super important to understand that AI is only as good as the people that are using it. And um, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out kind of things, input,
Mm.
output. So, that's why it's really important. Yes, the communication, like you mentioned, the transparency. How are companies going to use it? How is it going to impact employees? How can it actually make their life better at work? But also, who's going to be at the watch to make sure that it's accurate and that we're not just getting into a situation where it goes unchecked and then you're off the rails with bad data, misinformation, and just a whole plethora of other issues that would stem from that. So that's why it's really important to make sure that in your change initiative you include the human in the loop perspective from it. um,
Yeah.
yeah, this not, what you described first was a lack of understanding of how it can be used.
Hmm.
And then your second point is really more speaking to the accuracy of what data or the
Hmm.
outputs that AI can produce. But on that, if you don't mind, I mean, I do want to kind of dig in here. I
Hmm.
think it's really a good place to start talking about AI is not just, hey, I'm going to put something in, I'm going to get an output. There are so many other uses for AI that can streamline processes and help make some of the heavy lifting of analytics a lot easier. But it still is going to take the expert in the room to be able to differentiate between when the information is true and correct and factual, and then when it's not. And it's also going to take an expert in the room to guide the AI to do exactly what is needed to be done in a very specific way. So, in terms of fear of job loss, um, jobs will change. There will be jobs that will be eliminated. There is not enough sugar in the world to coat that fact. It is what it is. Okay. But I just recently attended a pretty long uh, AI expo and got my head blown completely. Like, I learned so much that I didn't even, that I wasn't even aware of. But the reality is that different jobs will be created because of AI, because you've got to be that human in the loop, so you have to understand how to work with it. Um, so I just, I wanted to point that out. And it's speaking to how organizations can use change management to help facilitate that. There are certain very specific processes in place to help you achieve that level of success in adopting AI. And I think it begins with first understanding how AI can help the business remain competitive in this landscape where everybody's going towards it. How can AI help you be more productive? And then in the conversation of people being very anxious and fearful about job loss, I want to look at it this way. I invite people to think about it differently and see, and this is where the trust and the honesty is going to play a big, huge part in how companies will use AI. They need to be honest about what they're going to do. There are people, and I'm not going to name names, but there are certain people who've been in the news last year and they've just been gung ho talking about how they're just anxious and can't wait to lay off a bunch of people because AI, they want AI to replace their workforce. And that, when you see things like that in the news, that is absolutely driving a lot of the fear. And I want to say that that is unfortunately a very greedy and deviant way of looking at things. Unless your company was just like really, had it needed to shave off some of the fat anyway. You weren't running a very efficient company to begin with. Well, that's a separate matter. And if you needed to lay people off anyway, well, again, separate matter. But I think that the trap is that there are some people who've taken the mindset that AI is some sort of magic that is just going to replace humans just like that, almost without implication. And I think that's a
Hmm.
very wrong-minded approach, in my opinion. And so,
Hmm.
if companies can think of it this way, instead of taking the approach, and which I think is a greedy, short-sighted approach, that you just want to whack your workforce in half or whatever, rather than taking that approach and saying, oh well, maybe I have a workforce of, let's say for ease of math, you have a workforce of 50,000 employees or something like that, and you're like, oh, AI is going to allow me to reduce my workforce to 25,000, like cut it in half or whatever. Instead of that, why don't you take the approach that, hey, with AI, I have a workforce of 50,000, but if I use AI appropriately, I could be productive. I could produce the output of a workforce of 75,000, maybe 100,000
Hmm.
employees without raising another piece in the budget for labor. I can
Yeah.
produce. I can multiply my productivity with AI. And the way that you save money is by keeping your workforce in place, but leveraging them and getting more production out of them. And the
Yeah.
benefit for the employee, actually, if you think about it, could be that if AI is able to relieve them of doing some of the most mundane, boring parts of their job and frees them up to be more creative, more innovative,
Hmm.
and do more interesting work and do more of the work that's actually aligned with the core skills related to their job tasks, work can become more enjoyable. um, Hopefully it can become less stressful, and it can become more enriching. So
Yeah.
that's a different perspective that I like to present to answer that question of am I going to lose my job? And that's why it's super important for companies to just be really honest about, well, what are you going to do?
Hmm.
Are you going to do a rug pull on your people and get them all worked up and rah rah, let's do AI, when you know in your heart your intention is to just lay everybody off? Well, that's a
Yeah.
whole other conversation for another day, but
Yeah. Yeah. Now, gosh, all of your points are just so on point, Rhonda. You mentioned a number of things. I had some things jotted off to the side in my notes that you've presented, and thank you for that. If I were to just maybe take one or two things that you just mentioned and underscore the level of importance of them, I would say that on the organization side, they've got to build trust up front. And that just requires basically being very open to, as you mentioned a couple of times, how AI is going to be used and governed. Um, you know, I think that would alleviate a lot of stress and anxiety up front with employees with regards to adopting it in the workplace. The other thing is this: a lot of employees feel that, hey, well, I don't have the skills or the experience for what's coming down the pike. So, the lack of skills and training is another uh, area that needs to really be considered by the employee as they step into it. Um, you know, uh, because I don't care how, you know, well they may receive it if they're not properly upskilled and trained in it or whatever. You're not going to have a successful adoption of AI in the workplace to begin with. So, but
yeah.
certainly employees are probably feeling somewhat overwhelmed, feeling maybe even incapable, like this thing is bigger than life. I have no experience. I've had no training in it or whatever. How am I going to get, you know, how am I going to have a fair chance of maybe keeping my job, if you will? So I know a lot of employees are probably feeling that way. So
So
that
you
certainly
mean the overwhelm? Are you saying that the overwhelm is majority going to be felt by the employees? Is that what you're saying?
by the employees. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was listening to you, but I don't know, my mind kind of wandered off, and I think I was thinking for a moment there that you were, because I think that some of that can also be shared by leadership as well. This is a
Oh yeah.
new this is new for everybody. I mean, employees have their own set of worries and concerns, but leaders do as well, because this really requires you to pull out your leadership chops. um, One of the most important pieces around this is making sure that we're really leading with empathy and the transparency. Sometimes people don't like to be that transparent, but it's a reality that people can smell when you're not being transparent. And so it's
Absolutely.
going to take a special kind
Get,
of leader to kind of step through this monumental phenomenon of
yeah. Yeah.
this age of AI, because it's just, I don't know, I just have, it look, this is just an instinctive feeling that I have. And it's gonna it you know things are gonna be different. It's You have got to be a different leader. And I'll tell you the reason why I believe this is because I do see more and more leaders, for example, finally understanding the value of coaching. And this is like a side note, but it's relevant because, especially in the team coaching space, because when you're talking about a big change like this and you've got to get teams on board and get them to be more interdependent and work well together, to get them to be more effective so that they can take on the challenges that they face as they adopt AI and all the things that come with it. Um, they understand now the value of being able to inspire and coach and help people to become more self aware so that they can embrace these things automatically and of their own volition. Do you know? So I already see a change. It's like well, I, in my experience, and I mean, this is anecdotal, but in my experience, some of the most common styles of leadership that I have experienced have been more directive. You know, I'm the leader. This is what I say. You do what I say. Yeah, I can be charismatic, and I can, sit and have lunch with you, and be friendly to a degree. But there's like a clear barrier between the leader and their the people that they lead, right?
Hmm.
Their direct reports, and then and down. I think we're in a completely different age. I think even from a generational perspective, these younger folks, they're just not responding to that leadership style the way
Hmm.
that perhaps people in my generation would have. So
Hmm.
there's a lot to unpack here that is going to require leaders in these companies to not only change the way they do things because of AI, but it's also at a crossroads with generational changes and societal changes, and things are just exploding all around.
Yeah.
um,
No. You're absolutely right. With regards to leadership, it's going to be paramount that leaders approach this in the right manner. You mentioned a number of things that resonate with me, that I'll just make a quick comment on. That style of management, that top down, this is the way we're going to do it or whatever, is not going to work. Okay. Um, Also the speed of which to roll these things out. As you and I have discussed often in the past, organizations, they get caught up with flavor of the month initiatives, projects, programs, etc., and it's like a race, if you will. Okay, let's roll this out because this is what's happening. This is what's occurring in the marketplace, and so we
Mhm.
want to be one of the first. And that's not going to work with the rollout of AI. Employees will definitely need to feel like they're involved in the process or whatever. And that's where it's going to take this different leadership, if you will, to make
Mhm.
sure that the employees are engaged up front, the empathy that you talk about, you know, the employee care, if you will,
Mhm.
hearing from them, allowing them to be heard, allowing them to take part really sincerely, being listened to, if you will. All of that's going to be very important in the rollout of AI, because employees are going to want to feel like you know they're a part of it, they're empowered, and this is just not being shoved, if you will, down their throat. And the other part of the leadership that's going to have to take place is that these leaders are going to have to lead with a clear vision, okay, up front. How are we going to use it, as you've mentioned? How is this going to be used? How are you all going to be utilized in the process? Also, be upfront and talk about, if there's a possibility that there could, there could be some changes in jobs. Some jobs may go away or whatever.
Mhm.
Be upfront and frank about that or whatever. But also, then, following that, emphasize how the employee can come along with it, how they can ride along with it or whatever. It might even mean that in the process, your job changes or you might be doing something slightly different. It might be an opportunity for doing something different, doing something more impactful, something more meaningful, um, being a partner to this new technology or whatever. Because guess what? We're going to need you. We're still going to need you. Okay. And so embrace it that way. As you mentioned earlier, that's a different mindset, if you will, that employees can adopt with regards to AI. So leadership, I'll just, you're so spot on with regards to how important the leadership of this uh, will will be.
Well, and I think it's fantastic because that they really set the tone for how all this can go. I mean, really, it's really an opportunity. And if you look at it that way, some people look at it like it's a big pain in the neck. Um, but like as with any challenge, there come opportunities, and
Well, that's inherent with just about, and you know this, that's inherent with any change initiative.
right,
Initially, folks, without understanding what's going on, it's like, oh God, here we go again. Right.
right. But I think particularly with this one though, because what's sticking in my mind is like I said, if you could really be creative and really push the envelope in terms of what kind of a return you can get from going ahead and being thoughtful with your adoption of AI. So, like I said, um, if you have someone who, I'll use myself as an example. Okay. So, when I'm doing a team coaching initiative, my skill lies in doing the team coaching. Okay. Um, Understanding what models to pull from, being trained to recognize when the tone changes, being able to identify different type of interactions that are going on with team members and kind of pick up on the vibe in the team and being able to ask the right questions and how to just it's a separate skill, but there's a lot of work involved in dissecting all of that, and there's a ton of work in just in transcripts alone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gosh, hey, using AI to capture, and I'm talking about the most basic thing that AI can do, which has
Mm-hmm.
already been a thing for a while is getting transcripts, right? Capturing, meeting notes and summarizing. That saves me so much time, okay? So guess what? Because I'm not just killing my eyeballs reading all these transcripts and, going back and summarizing these things manually. AI helps me. That's administrative minutia that is quite boring. Um, or I could have hired someone and spent a lot of money to hire someone to go through the transcripts and do that for me. Well, AI can do that for me. But of course, like I said, I'm not going to just leave it to that. I'm going to go back and review everything. I'm going to go back and listen and make sure that it captured everything correctly. I'm going to validate what AI produces because I have the final say. I'm the expert in the room, and this is what I'm talking about. But yet and still, even though there's work involved in doing that, because I'm not, you know, spending my time doing this admin stuff, it frees me up to spend more time either, perfecting my skills, learning something else, innovating, doing something completely different, producing something else. So if companies can think along these lines and say, yeah, what can we do? Like if we have, X number of, widget makers or whatever in the company and, before AI, they spent 20% of their day doing these really mundane data entry tasks or something like that. What can we get these folks to do now that they're freed up from doing that? How much more creative can you allow people to be? And how much more innovative can you be as a company? Because now, if you collectively have freed up a lot of time, you have more time to really hone your skills and focus on being excellent. And that's the way that I think people should think about it. It's kind of like if you're a Michelin star chef and you really know your stuff. You're the brains in the kitchen. You're the lead chef. You make the recipes. You know what works. Do you think that if a restaurant hired a Gordon Ramsay or someone to come cook at their restaurant at his level of expertise and the amount of money that he costs, do you think that he's put to his best use chopping onions? No. You have somebody else to do that, okay?
Right.
So I look at it like AI is like the helper in the kitchen. Like it's chopping the onions, it's doing the stuff that's like, yeah, nobody really likes to do that, but it's necessary to get it done.
Yeah.
And then the chef
Yeah.
can just walk in, all the ingredients are already prepared, they're all laid out, and he can just come in and be an amazing chef exponentially to a much higher power of productivity and efficiency because he's no longer bogged down with doing all these things himself, the chopping of the onions and whatnot, if you will.
Absolutely.
That's kind of my
Yeah.
analogy that I use. You're still the expert in the room, but you can
Right.
be magnified and be AI can be your force multiplier if used properly, and then you really are thoughtful and deliberate in the way that you use it in such a way that you are still in control as the human in the loop. You're still running things, doing things, AI can help you ideate, but you still bring the human spark to it. You still bring the human element to it. You still bring your creativity. You still bring your expertise. You know better than AI how this needs to go because AI gets trained on how you train it. And yeah, I know it's changing and it's getting smarter and, it's smarter than some people. I get that. But I'm holding on to this perspective. And this is what I offer to companies to think about it this way. It's a pain in the butt to adopt. Yes, it's a big, huge change. And there's a lot to it. There's a lot of moving parts. And it's moving at an extremely rapid pace. It's almost impossible to keep up with, but we must. But I think that with the right mindset and the right intention, um, this is an opportunity to really go forward in a really powerful and meaningful way. And to that point, that's the whole reason why, from the last episode, I brought up that, the framework that we're building right now to help companies do that in a
Absolutely.
strategic, planned out way. Um,
Yeah.
so I just wanted
Yeah.
to piggyback on what you were saying.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll just echo on that in that it's been very interesting to see how AI is evolving. Of course, we've just spent the majority of our time talking about what those challenges are, what most of employees' fears and anxiety is a result of. However, um, I have seen over this past year or so some folks who have gotten used to it, or I should not say used to, but maybe more familiar with it
Mm-hmm,
or using it more in their work or whatever. And
mm-hmm,
they are excited about it because they are seeing the things that you just drilled down on, the efficiencies,
mm-hmm,
the ability now to spend more time in other areas because they've adopted using AI to do those more routine, mundane type tasks that are
mm-hmm,
part of their responsibilities. And now that they found a tool, if you will, to take care of that for them very, very efficiently or
mm-hmm,
whatever, it allows them to spend more time in other areas to maybe even spend time training. A lot of
mm-hmm.
employees complained about, well, if I only had the time to learn this, that, or the other, whatever. Well, guess what? AI is allowing that to happen now because folks can uh, they have the time that's given to them as a result of having AI do perform other tasks for them. So, well stated point. Um, Let me see. I think we've covered a lot of territory in terms of what some of the challenges to adopting it in the workplace are.
Um,
The
yeah,
only
those
the
are
only thing
those.
I'll
Mm-hmm,
say is this, and you've mentioned it, but I'm going to underscore it even more or whatever, because I think really it's the bottom line to employees feeling more comfortable with adopting it. They just basically need to understand why it's being adopted, okay, and how it aligns with their work and how it aligns with the organizational goals, okay? Because most organizations, especially this time of year, starting out the new year, what's being revisited? Organizational goals. Okay, people are actually working on them to talk about the goals of last year and whether they met them or not. So when this is adopted or whatever, it certainly has to resonate and align to what the organizational goals are.
well, of course. I
And I
mean
think
that.
once that
Yeah,
happens, you get people to come along with it.
and that's like with anything that you do. And I don't know. I just I'm probably going to sound jaded, but they don't always do a good job of that. But this is another opportunity where I think AI would make it easier to do that. It can just make a lot of things easier. But again, like I said, it's not AI is not magic. It's not magic. I mean, I in the I would say that the thing that I've seen that disappoints me the most about people who adopt AI a little bit too enthusiastically is that they do so at the expense of quality, and they do so in a way that's lazy, in my opinion. Actually, it's not just my opinion, it's the fact, it's the truth. I've seen scholars use AI recklessly. They just dump stuff in there. They take whatever it spits out and they're like, "Oh, that's great." And they just like copy paste and just throw it out there. I think
Hmm.
this is probably also a big reason why people are pushing back on AI, because they're seeing that AI is magnifying what human flaws already exist. If you're a lazy human and you want to cut corners and you want to take a bullshit approach to your work, AI is going to make it that much easier for you to do that. Pardon my French, but whatever. I said what I said. It's the damn truth. Okay? Pisses me off. I mean, I get pissed off about that. I don't like lazy people. Like, stop being lazy. I get it. Okay, be efficient. Cut corners if you have to under pressure. But my God, could that not be your MO? And that I think is what really has people who are very conscientious about their work really upset and worried that, because it's just going to make the jokers at work even worse jokers. So this is again why leadership needs to be very, very careful with how they take this approach, and they need to not be lazy leaders. They need to make sure they have the right people in the right positions in the first place, and it is incumbent upon them to hold people accountable and to demand an ethical approach to everything. I've been saying this for as long as I've been working in my career, because this is not just an AI conversation. This is a you know lazy management conversation that has just ruffled my feathers for a very, very long time, and it's not going away. But what I have seen is that while people could hide that lazy way of being, they could kind of fly under the radar and be just as lazy and ineffective as they wanted to be. Well, guess what? They're getting exposed now, because it's like you're so obvious. Do you not know that when you copy and pasted that there's code in your text that you just threw out there? Like, we can see it, buddy. You just pulled that straight out of ChatGPT. You didn't even bother to edit it. You didn't even bother to make it your own. You just threw that slop out there. And it's so easy to detect. And the thing about it is that, and I kind of like this, I like the fact that there's AI fatigue that's happening already, because people are already speaking out against it. So I hope that folks will take heed and get a clue and understand this is unacceptable and do better, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing I wanted to say, is like, don't just think, oh, hey, I've got this crutch. Oh, wow. Made my life easier. No, it just made you even more lazy than you already were. You can just do it a lot faster now. And that's
Yeah.
like, I just
So
couldn't go
so
without saying that, man, because it's
so
like,
on that note, future and existing AI users, beware that you can be exposed if you don't use the tool in its right manner.
absolutely. I
Just
mean,
saying.
but I think that if you pay attention to the people who are using it the right way, and they are really doing amazing things with it, those are the folks that you need to pay attention to. Those are your rising stars in your organization. And you
Mhm.
know what? If you've got sloppy, lazy folks and they're still doing sloppy, lazy things, then maybe those are the people who do need to get,
Yeah.
because they probably already needed to get, you just didn't
Yeah.
know it.
Yeah. By the way,
Ooh.
Rhonda, I will note this: having come out of higher education a year ago, I keep track of how it's being used in the classroom and all, and certainly there are lots of tools at the exposure of or exposure rather of professors to make sure that students aren't using it in the wrong manner with regards to plagiarism, that kind of thing. So
And there
um,
should be. And those tools have been
yeah,
around for a while. I don't know if people
yeah,
are aware of that. They've been around for a while.
yeah.
Um, but I think that, with something like this afoot, we have got to be extremely careful
Hmm.
with how we use AI.
Yeah,
There are already people that are raising the flags and sounding the alarms. Like, it needs to be regulated and controlled. It needs to be dealt with ethically, um, for so many obvious reasons. Um, but
Yeah.
I think it's an opportunity for people to just like, look, wake up and ask yourself, if you're a leader of the company, are you really paying attention to your direct reports? Are you really holding people accountable? Are you making sure that they're holding the people beneath them accountable? Are you really taking a systemic approach to organizational effectiveness? Really? That's the
Hmm.
big question, because no amount of a change management initiative, as well pulled together as it may be, no amount of leveraging AI to 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 do better and to grow and to remain profitable and competitive, no amount of any of that is going to be as beneficial and as optimal as it could be if the inner workings of the leadership is weak and it's not, people aren't being held accountable.
Sure.
And like I said, I mean, this is not a new problem. I've
Mm-mm.
been seeing this problem
No.
for forever. But it's just like, hey man, we live in a time now, we can't afford to be like that anymore. Like, wake up,
Hmm.
man. Wake up, because there if you take the power of AI and you couple that with a company that has leadership that's like bang on and works with integrity, and they lead with empathy and ethics, and they're good at what they do, and they are very proficient and they hold people accountable, you can no longer get by with the good old boy method of, oh, we're just going to float by and be what I refer to as being successful despite yourself.
Right.
There are a lot of companies that are super super successful, but they don't even realize how much more successful and how much more profitable and how much more amazing they could be if they actually just invested even just a small percentage more of give a damn, you know?
Hmm.
That special
Hmm.
ingredient. um, and it's because they're the companies that are, you've heard the phrase, they're too big to fail. They're making so much money that even their broken parts, nobody cares about it, because like they can't even feel that, because they're
Yeah.
successful despite themselves. I am of the opinion that we're in a day and age where AI is actually going to create so many opportunities for other people who may not even had access to these opportunities. They can
Hmm.
start companies, they can grow companies, they can take companies in different directions like never before. And so I don't know, it's exciting. I mean,
It
yeah,
is exciting.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
being a
It's
little bit cynical and maybe a little bit pissy. I'm taking the piss or whatever. But I think it's true. I mean, I think if people would just stop and be honest with themselves, I don't think I'm saying anything that's wrong.
Well,
Um,
you're coming from that place because of where you work. You work under the hood in terms of implementation of a number of different types of workplace changes or whatever. And so I think that's what you're speaking to. But overall, though, and I'm glad to hear you make the comment that you just made, and express your own personal excitement about this, because it is a time where we all should be excited about the you know what's open to us, what's possible with regards to this new tool. We just need to make sure that organizations approach it. When I say we, people in that do the type of work that we do or whatever, we just need to make sure and guide and support organizations to roll it out in the right manner. So um,
well, and on that note, because I know we're about out of time, but over the coming weeks, months, whatever, I mean, this year, I'm really excited to share more about the ETAC framework that I'm working on to help companies do specifically that, because I know we started this conversation talking about how to help companies adopt AI um,
mhm.
through a specific change model, which is what I'm building. And a lot of what we talked about here today is baked into that model. The transparency piece, the trust, accountability is huge, and there are ways to actually there are ways to actually be tactical about being accountable. But like I
Hmm.
said, it takes effort. And that's the thing that frustrates me, because that's why I say this is lazy management. You've got to be willing to keep an eye on things. You've got to be willing to actually manage and lead people. Two different things. You either manage people or you lead them. It's two different things, but they're both equally important. You've got to be willing to do it right, and do it in a way that is systemic, and in a way that's structured and strategic. And
Hmm.
that's part of what I implement into the model, is giving people the tools to be able to do that. You can say, oh, well, we need to hold people accountable. Well, that sounds great philosophically, but how do you actually do that?
Hmm.
What do you do? What does that mean? You know, because, speaking to misdirected expectations, misinformation, conflicting incentives, lack of direction, lack of expectations altogether, or vague expectations, unclear, conflicting expectations, things that are not written down, things that are not checked in upon in a timely manner, making assumptions that people understood what you meant and you don't follow up to make sure that they did. There are ways to remedy all of that, but it's just in the matter of doing it. It doesn't have to be hard. You just have to
Hmm.
do it. And some folks want to do that and they mean well, but maybe they don't have the skills, excuse me, to actually put something like that in a concrete manner and put it into place. That's where I come in. That's my area of expertise, putting those things together to help people to use those tools to do those things. And so as we approach this AI and people are like scared and they're, I could put myself in the shoes of a leader of a big organization that knows that they're doing this,
Hmm.
but they may not have um, a deeper understanding of how to do it in a way that it's a human centered approach, and what it takes to actually facilitate that. So that's what makes me excited, because I hear change practitioners talking about it. I just read on a thread day before yesterday an important question: how do you make sure that this? How do you do this? And this lady genuinely wanted to know. She really put the question out there on the platform. How do I deal with this AI? How do I deal with this? How do I deal with this from a change management perspective? And there was a lot of thoughtful conversation around that. People were chiming in, like, they talked a lot about trust. They talked about communication. Those are really obvious things. We understand that. But the thing that I saw that was missing, which I thought was, it kind of tickled me, because I'm like, haha, this is what I'm working on. Nobody came in with explicit step by step. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. I shared with
Hmm.
you some of the tools yesterday.
Yeah.
This is how you put your messaging house together. This is how you do a heat map for this. This is how you
Hmm.
do that. You use this document for that. You use this survey for this. You did that. Um, and so it was interesting, because it's um, it's just a new thing, and we already have to be very careful and take a human approach with change management anyway, because that's what change management is. It's the human, the people side of project management.
Hmm.
But in this age of AI, especially with the backdrop of a lot of the things that are going on in the world today that are super, super over the top, people are ultimately super stressed out on the economy and like wars and all this other stuff. I mean, the backdrop against which people are having to share this experience is special and not wonderful either. So that only adds to the complexity of what we're going through at the time. And I think that it's very important to be empathetic to that, because there's an added layer of stress to just waking up in the morning these days without
Hmm.
having to worry about AI taking your job.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyhow, I think that's all we've got for today. And,
Yes.
Kevin, thanks for sharing your points. And thanks to the audience for listening. If you want to
Thank
reach out
you.
to us, reach us at www.whitewolfinc.com. Join the conversation. If you like this, please click like and comment and share this podcast with your colleagues. Thank you so much. And we will see you the next time. Bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye bye.